Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Vox Vomitus. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of the Kindle Award-winning novel for Best Horror, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as Pretty Ugly and the Hotel series. Joining me today, as always, is my Vox Vomitus vixen, Allison Martine, author of The Bourbon Books, which includes Dibs Since September, Move on Melinda, and Climb the Salmon Ladder. With us today is a Vox Vomitus first. We have two editors of Other Terrors, an inclusive anthology. We have Vince Liaguno
Excellent.
and Rena Mason. I got both names right, so I'm just going to applaud myself and applaud both of you. Welcome to Vox Vomitus.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Yes.
We're going to start with just having you guys talk a little bit about yourselves and a little bit about Other Terrors.
We have questions,
but
I hope we
we'll
have answers.
And if not, you can just make them up. We are not a hard-hitting investigative journalist type of show, so you could just lie to us, and we would be like, "All right."
If it's entertaining, it has to be a big lie.
Well, it sold 1 million copies, so that's
Okay.
Rena, ladies first. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I am first and foremost a writer, and I've been writing for about maybe since 2008. And I have
Don't make us do math.
Yeah, a while. It's been a while.
It's
been a little
years.
over. Yeah, it's been a little while. And I have a novel, a novella, lots of short stories. This is my first co-editing gig, so it was kind of fun and exciting for me in that regard. And I took it on because they said Vince was going to be the other co-editor. And
you were the selling point, Vince. I love it.
Yeah, he's a pro. So
once in my life, I was the selling point.
Take it away, Vince.
Well, I am also a writer. I started in the early 2000s. Very strange kind of way. I was a huge fan of the music artist Laura Branigan. And Laura Branigan sadly passed away in 2004 of a brain aneurysm. And for me, at the time, I was in my 30s. It was kind of like the first, my generation celebrity that I loved that had passed away. And I had this really surreal, odd opportunity to go to an auction on Long Island of all of her personal and career memorabilia. So I wound up with all this really wild stuff, like her wedding album and photos. So I wanted to do something with it. So I actually pitched an article to a magazine called Autograph Collector. And that was literally my first sale. Did that for a couple of years. My first book was called my first album. Yes. It was a remake of Laura Branigan.
I was going to say that all Laura Branigan covers.
My first book came out in 2006. It was called The Literary Six. It was a slasher film in print, won an Ippy Award for the horror category in silver. And then I segued into editing and became an anthologist. And my first anthology was the LGBTQ anthology Unspeakable Horror from the Shadows of the Closet, which went on to win the prestigious Bram Stoker Award. And it was the first time since and before, the only time an expressly LGBTQ anthology has ever won in that category. So I'm a licensed nursing home administrator by day, and my jam is slasher films, books, and Jamie Lee Curtis.
I was going to say, that was Tubby. Tubby made my
And the dog approves.
The dog approves. He heard Jamie Lee Curtis and was like, woo, queen of the final girls.
Exactly. Yep.
I was going to say, I did stalk your Instagram and I saw an awful lot of Jamie Lee Curtis which I approve of. A
little bit. I'm not stalking her in the weird, like, Annie Wilkes kind of way. It's more like I
you wouldn't chain her to a bed.
No, I want to drink tea with her and watch Downton Abbey. That would be like the ideal afternoon.
Let's just throw that out into the universe. But we want that for you, Vince.
Vince, with your caretaking qualities, I think anyone who was chained up with you would get quality care, and it wouldn't be that bad of an experience, honestly.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
I'd hobble you, then I'd heal you. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
when people, it's funny in the day job as a nursing home administrator, when people find out I'm a writer and they say, well, what do you write? And I say, well, like, I try to say mysteries, horror.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
That is
and
much
I'm like,
Dark fiction.
I'm like, well,
Dark fiction is always what I go to.
I help
Yeah.
people during the day and then I kill them at night. So that's kind of,
Just
yeah,
remember where you are. I'm sorry, I'm just flashing back to one of Josh Mellerman's stories in Goblin. Just remember which job you're at. Okay, guys? A little worried there.
So, other terrors. Let's talk about how this became. Like, how did it start? Like, whose idea was it? How did you, Allison and I have so many questions about like how the authors came to be. We know that there was a call for HWA authors, but you already had people like.
Because I'll explain. I got confused because I'm listening to it on my phone because I don't have time to sit and read because I got small kids. And I was trying to then find a table of contents. And when I found the list, it was in these different categories. And I'm going, okay, this isn't the order they're in the book. So this is not as helpful as I was hoping it would be. But it seemed like there were different categories of authors brought in. And we were wondering how those categories were chosen and how the people were selected to be brought into the anthology. And where did this start?
Go ahead, Rena. You start.
Well, you said that you were listening to the Audible of it, like that it's sectioned into categories. I believe that's probably something that the publisher did, because the table of contents Vince and I put together.
Yeah, see, I don't have a table of contents. What I have, it just goes through, and I think it's the same order. But when I went looking for it online, and when I found it, it was announced, and it was like, oh, these are Horror Writers Association people, and then these are others, and then these people are also contributing. So there were 3 groups. So those groups were listed, and it wasn't the same order they were in the book.
A little classism there. Wow.
I know, but
we were like,
may have been trying to explain it. It was,
yes, that wasn't us.
That was my question.
No,
So much drama.
Yeah, that wasn't us. But let's see. It was a few years ago, probably a little over 3 now, that Vince and I were saying. Lisa Morton, who was at the time the vice president of the HWA, approached me about wanting to do a book that she and Alex Shane have been wanting to pitch for a long time. As an HWA, part of the HWA anthology series. And it was Other Terrors. And she said that Vince was going to be the co-editor. At first I was just like, well, I don't think, that's she hadn't mentioned like co-editing. She's like, what do you think about this editing? And I was like, well, I don't think. And then she said, well, Vince would be co-editing. And I was like, well, whoa, because that's awesome because he's already a pro. And that made it a lot easier to come on board. And then once we came on board, it took off from there, and we just sort of crunched ideas. And it was all of us at the time, Vince, Alex Shane, and Lisa Morton, and myself, and we would just email back and forth. And Vince, you want to add how it went from there?
When Lisa had approached us, she approached us with this general idea of a diversity anthology.
Yeah.
And Rena and I from the get-go kind of said, diversity anthology sounds like a checklist, and was like, okay, we have one of this and one of
right. We need two LGBTQ.
Exactly.
We
kind of wanted it to be. We really wanted to look at the theme first, and pick a theme that the diversity would kind of grow organically from that theme. So we thought about the tried and true in horror, which is the other. And we originally actually came up with the idea, we were calling it Other Fears for the longest time.
Yes.
And then once Alec sold it to Harper, then they kind of suggested a title change and said, Other Terrors is so much stronger. We agreed. Obviously, to sell any kind of anthology, because the anthologies traditionally don't sell as well as a novel by Josh Mallerman or Stephen Graham Jones or any one of those guys. But we had to have names.
Then you had to get all of them to be in this.
Pretty much, yeah. So we actually started off with a list. We had 2 rounds. We had a list of 10 we approached. We were turned down by quite a few due to time constraints.
Okay.
Or maybe I don't know, maybe they just thought, who are these 2? I don't know.
Mhm.
But
Oh.
we wound up getting some good folks. We did another round, and that's how we wound up with the invited authors. And then we knew that we had, HWA told us we had 5 slots allotted in the anthology for members. And one of the things that Rena and I kind of talked about hush hush on the side was, you know what? Before we were editors, before we're writers, we were HWA members. And one of the things that you pay dues for is these opportunities to be in these anthologies.
Yeah.
5 slots, like, come on, man. So we really worked with our invited authors really closely and diligently, and we just were able to manage the word count that we actually doubled the amount of slots and had 10 slots for the HWA members. So we're really kind of proud of that.
Yeah.
You should
For these
be,
HWA
because
members, this is major, you know.
this is
That's
huge
awesome.
because they get to be in an anthology with some not too shabby names.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
not at
this
all.
table of contents is stacked. You know, Alice and I were like, oh, so many of like our former guests and our friends of Vox Vomitus are in this book. We were like, oh, Sean is there, Jennifer, Alma. Like,
Well,
it's
how do
just-
you think we got the ideas? We just looked through your episode guides.
I know.
That's-
I'm just like,
Yes.
oh, they had Jennifer, then they had Alma, and then they had, okay, good.
Well, then that explains why there are the different groups then, because the list of 10 then is the 10 HWA members that got those slots. I won't ask which ones were invited and which ones came on later for later submissions, because I don't want to hurt any feelings, but you can tell me later.
Honestly, the HWA members, I'm sure, are just thrilled that they're in it. They're not worried about who was invited, believe me.
Yeah.
Well, because then once you read it, that's the lovely thing about anthologies is someone might buy it because they recognize, I know Alma Katz, so I love her work. And then they buy the anthology and they get introduced to all these other authors.
Mhm.
So I always love it because I always feel it's like it's a gateway drug to
Yes,
other
it
people.
is.
who are-
Exactly.
What
It is.
else?
And it
Absolutely.
also it's also a gateway drug on just different types of storytelling. Like I love that you included
Yes.
poetry. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
including
You're
horror
welcome.
poetry in this, which I just feel like, you know, people don't even, I think the general layperson doesn't think of horror poetry as even a thing. Of course, people in the horror community were like, of course it's a thing.
Jen, that's
Yes.
what you write. So
Yeah,
is
I
what
mean,
I write.
and it's mind-boggling when you think about it, because it's like Edgar Allan Poe. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, one of the
Yes.
first, you know?
don't listen to that Raven. He lies.
Yeah.
Oh, but please, even poets like Tennyson, like
Yeah.
Emily Dickinson, that's
Oh, yeah.
all about
Mhm.
death
Mhm.
and you know, young maidens dying and perhaps
But it,
coming
but
back
it really
from the dead.
expands the borders then of, well, what do you consider horror? And that's the thing that when Jen and I were talking just before we went live, we were talking about how, yes, there are all these different authors from different backgrounds, but it wasn't just that they were bringing their own different backgrounds and lived experiences, but they're bringing different kinds of horror. So you're reading this
Mhm.
and you're jumping all over the place. That sometimes it's like, take a breath between the stories because you're getting whiplash when
Yeah.
you're going from a comedic horror. I don't know. I don't know if I was supposed to be laughing at some of these stories, but I loved them.
I know. Were we supposed to be laughing at Misinfection USA? Because
Was I supposed to be laughing at Tiddlywinks? Because I
I
liked
did
it.
laugh.
I think
Yes.
Shane would have been
I laughed
okay with you
too.
laughing at Mr.
Okay, good.
Yes.
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 She'd be all right with that.
Yeah.
Like,
Shane, if you're not okay with that, call in now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was.
Please
supposed
don't laugh at my story. It's very serious.
to
named
Yeah.
Tiddlywinks. I think it's a
be- Yeah. Yeah. That one
little
was.
bit tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
I
and
think that was definitely
I-
him.
Stephen, it was so funny because Stephen's been in all but one of my previous anthologies, and I really wanted him for this, and he was just so busy between My Heart is a Chainsaw and the new book, and he was like, I don't know, I don't have any ideas of it, and I was like, all right, Stephen, see you later, signed off, and then like 10 minutes later, I get an email, I thought of this great story, and then like an hour later, I've got 3,000 words from Stephen Graham Jones, and I'm like, yes, we got it. It's called Tiddlywinks, but who gives a shit? It's like awesome. So good.
Honestly, just that title alone is so intriguing. Where you're going, this is a horror anthology. Wait, what? And you see Tiddlywinks, and then
The true
I don't wanna
horror is
spoil it, what
losing your
Tiddlywinks
tiddlywinks
is.
when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And then you read it, and then you're like, oh,
have
okay,
that.
my God.
Yeah.
I know. I was like,
The
how is
millennial
this
side.
going to play in?
It's
And then I'm like,
it's like pre-millennial pogs. That's
Yeah. Well, we have to educate the youngins too,
Yeah.
They're gonna be like, what? Oh, but he does explain what it is before he
Mhm.
explains what it is.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Gross.
does. You can always depend on him for something really just out there and cool.
Yes.
Yes,
Which is why I love it.
I loved it so much. And also like so we know Sean very well as a guest of our show and a good friend. But of course we know him mainly for his crime fiction. So it was really awesome to see him dabble in horror, because every time he's been on our show, he's just like, well, I always wanted to be a horror writer first. Like that's what he thought he was going to be.
Yes. He has a dark side.
And I didn't even know that. Rena and I just, when we were going through the people we wanted to invite, one, we wanted people whose work we enjoy.
Yeah.
But we also wanted to kind of, horror has so many different shades and variations.
Yes.
And we kind of wanted to, see what somebody could bring to it from another genre adjacent kind of thing. And I mean, Sean just knocked it out of the park with that story.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm like, was this what you expected from him, or did this shock you then? Because this was not a crime fiction.
No, I totally expected him to write.
I honestly didn't know what to expect, because I loved Razorblade Tears, and I was just like, all right, let's ask him. And he responded quickly and was like, yeah, I'd love to. Okay. And I was really pleasantly surprised.
He is true. He's really amazing. And one of the great things about Sean is he's just such a fan of the community, whether it's the crime community, the horror community,
Writing.
the writing community, the reading community. The first time he was on our show, we literally had a guest cancel, or what we thought was going to be a cancellation, like last minute. And I was like, and this was like right when Blacktop Wasteland was like just starting to take off. And I'm like, well, Sean seems nice. I don't know him, but I'm just going to message him on Facebook and say, hey, will you be on our show? I know it's like in an hour. And
okay, it was the day before.
It was the day before.
Totally exaggerating. That was so bad, because I always read before we have a guest on, and I thought the guest that I had read for it was canceling. He got moved back an hour. We did back-to-back shows that day, but Sean shows up and is just like, sure, I'll do it. And we're like, thank you. And next thing we know, he has every award known to man.
Literally every award.
Every single award.
Well deserved.
You wanted to make sure that you could just hook this anthology to that star as it just continues to rise. And well done.
Well done. Well done. I know the first paragraph of his story in Other Terrors, I think, is just like chef's kiss perfection. I like read it and I was like, God, like if Sean wasn't such an amazing person, I'd want to be real jealous and hate him, but I can't. He's awesome.
No, you want to hang out with him, and that's what's amazing.
I do. I told him that I want to get drunk in an Applebee's with him.
Why
he was great to deal with. We had a great rapport with him. We actually everybody was just a delight to deal with. They really were.
Well, you wouldn't tell us if anybody was terrible, because you don't want to be like, by the way, this person. No, just hey, we're the worst. And then I got iguanas mailed to me, and I don't understand that. Honestly, that was another one of the ones that I really enjoyed, was Invasive Species, which starts with an iguana, but it is not nearly as much about iguanas as I might have thought. There were reptiles involved in the book, and some of them were harmed. The iguanas are fine, guys. The iguanas.
No iguanas were harmed in the writing of this story.
No. Well, that's the lovely thing. It's writing. Nothing was actually harmed except
the brain. The brain.
Yeah.
Sometimes our livers.
How
much were you drinking trying to get through this, Jen? Did any of these stories drive you to drink, other than Misinfection USA?
I loved that so much.
There are things wrong with us.
I know. Right? I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. So Allison and I were curious. We were talking again before the show. Obviously, you have this list of authors that were invited, but you didn't know exactly what they were going to be giving you. So how does that come into play? Like, do you think, oh God, what if they all do vampire stories? Or what if they
changes
all
to Other Fangs as the title?
Just change the theme, exactly.
We didn't have editors on, but we have had an anthology of like a bunch of shadow, all vampire stories. And I much prefer getting to read a variety, because you can only read, and there is a lot of variety within vampires, but this was not a vampire centric thing. So we are being tongue in cheek here.
Yes.
I think with this, I think I don't know. Rena, were you worried? I wasn't really worried.
I wasn't worried. You have to really trust your authors. And then there was a few of them that when we invited them, they kind of gave us a quick synopsis of what they had in mind to write, which was really awesome. I remember Jennifer did that with her story.
I loved her story.
Like a sentence or two of it, and we were just like, "Oh, that sounds awesome." The idea.
That's Jennifer McMahon's Idiot Girls, yes?
Yes.
Because just to clarify, because since I got to listen to it, and I have some questions, I don't know how much you were involved in the production of the audio. So when it's an anthology, you do have multiple different narrators, and I loved the one who was doing Idiot Girls, because now I have to say Egypt Girls, because that's how the narrator says it the whole time, where there's a character in there who has, he has a long last name, but you never hear it. But it just Mr. G, so no one knows exactly where he's from. So he has like this unintelligible accent, and he just always says Egypt Girls all the time, and no one knows where he's from. And so it's like, well, everyone's offended, but no one's really offended because we don't know which ethnicity that we're making fun of. But all we know is calls them Egypt Girls the whole time. They kind of like it, so it's all right. But I
opportunity offense.
Yes,
exactly.
But the thing, I think what was good, even though it was a themed anthology, the theme was broad enough that I really wasn't, we weren't concerned at all when the stories came in. And then we still had that other half with the reader, with the member stories. So that definitely, once we had the invited author stories in, we already kind of had an idea of tone and momentum. So then as we were reading, it definitely informed our reading with the member stories.
Right.
There would have been member stories that maybe had, Sean and Jennifer submitted something totally different about vampires. Maybe it wouldn't have been so-and-so's story. Maybe we would have accepted, that other story we passed on.
Right.
So that part, I would definitely say it affected.
So you basically accepted one group first, and then you could look. And so I have to say, it comes in waves. See what I did there? That's one of the titles. Sorry, that's one of the titles of the story. So you were able to kind of see what you had, and then see how to make it a fully fledged anthology with balance, rather than let's just double down on what we have.
Yes,
broad.
Absolutely.
We were reading concurrently as the invited stories were coming in, so we kind of knew.
Yeah, I mean. It was great because it was just I was thinking about the process, and some stories like zombie stories, zombies are so overplayed, you don't want to think, well, we don't really want a zombie story, but I remember reading that when I was like, oh, that story is really
this one
awesome.
can stay.
Yeah, we loved it.
You're like, we don't want zombie stories, except we want that zombie story.
Yeah,
that was one of the ones we both agreed on right away.
Yes,
there were a couple that there was some back and forth on, but that was one of the ones we agreed on right away. Good job, Shayna.
Yes, she has a great story about her story too.
Oh, there's a story. Do you know her story?
Do you know her story about it? Yeah.
Well, her story was she had, when she was like a teenager, she was going to camp, and she picked up a HWA anthology series that was edited by Dennis Etchison. I think it was like one of the first ones. And then she showed a picture, and she's like, when she was growing up, she was like, I'm going to be a writer, and I'm going to get into this book. And it's like, so, like, I don't know if it's 20, but I want to say like 20 years later, she has a copy of it, and her name, is in it, and she's in the book. So that's like really cool, right?
So you guys are now part of her bucket list.
Yeah. You made like her childhood dream come true.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
So I have to ask both of you, just like personally, this doesn't have to do with other terrors, but you're both obviously dark fiction authors, if we're just going to say, like, so we don't freak people out and be like, I'm a horror author. What was it and when was it that made you kind of gravitate towards horror and dark fiction? Like, what weird childhood thing happened to both of you?
Ladies
Vince,
first.
do you want to go, or do you want me to go? Well, I think for me it was the Where the Wild Things Are. When I was little in kindergarten, I loved that book, and I love the monsters in that book. I thought Max was bad. I thought he was naughty. He should have gotten more trouble than he did. And then he goes over and he makes friends with the monsters, and they made him into a pal, and he got to be like a king there. and then he leaves them. I don't know. I felt sorry for the monsters, and
They should have
I
killed
thought,
him, right?
yeah,
They
or maybe
certainly-
stay on the island, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think we were all expecting him to get eaten, and that he didn't get eaten was kind of a letdown, but that's all right.
yes, so that's where my mind went, was like, because it was sort of a symbiotic relationship, because he brought the monsters, uh, to something human, and he should have had to stay there, I think, for his punishment. So that was that was where the horror started. And I probably, if I would have like given a report or something in class, stuff in kindergarten, I think Max should have had to stay on the island. I can
Been forced
imagine
to
the
stay
looks
there
I
by
would
the
have gotten
monsters.
from the other
I
kids.
can imagine in 6th grade, I wrote some Nightmare on Elm Street fan fiction and turned it in for a short story project at school. And my teacher just wrote the word no on it. Didn't give it a grade, not anything, just no. And I'm like,
Yes.
all right. And that's when I realized I want to do this for my life. Like,
Mhm.
I want to make
Yeah.
people go, no.
Well,
not
and
that.
Rena, I feel like if fan fiction would have been a thing back when we were children, you could have written your own.
Oh,
What if they
yes.
call like the fix it ending? Like, and this
Yes.
is where Max gets what's coming to him. And there you go. But back then, I don't think there really is picture book fan fiction, but maybe there should be. Good night, Moon.
There should.
There should.
Right.
What about you, Vince? Where did Michigan hurt you?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm a geographical mutt because I was born in Pennsylvania, raised in New Jersey, spent most of my life in New York, and I'm a recent Michigan transplant. My fiance is from Michigan. His family's from here, so that's why we moved here.
This is how people end up in the Midwest. I think it's usually like.
Well, I actually really love it. I
That
actually really
I
love
got
Michigan.
Michigan.
It's a cool state. I would say my horror background started when I grew up. I had a mom who struggled with mental illness, so home life was a little bit of a horror show. And my dad used to take me every Saturday to kind of get me out of that situation. We had these things on the weekends called Buddy Days, and Buddy Days was usually a burger and a root beer and a frosted mug, which I thought was the coolest thing.
Was it A&W?
Who knows? It was probably just generic brand in some little dive, place on the side of the road. But we'd always go see a movie. So when I was, 7, 8, it was all the Irwin Allen disaster movies, Towering Inferno, Earthquake.
Yeah.
And then one summer, this little movie called Jaws came out. And
No one's ever heard of that movie.
And my dad said, hey, I was 8 years old. He said, do you want to go see Jaws? Sure, Dad. Yeah, that looks cool. Well, it took, and I have this story on my website. It took 3 successive tries for me to get through that movie. The first time I made it all the way till poor naked Chrissy gets slammed into the buoy before it was like, Daddy, I have to leave. Let's leave. We have to leave, Daddy. This is too scary. And then each time we got up to another scary, but on the 4th try, Vince made it through Jaws, and I was hooked. And then in 1978, when I was 10, of course, went to see Halloween with my dad, and that just cemented my love of slasher movies and Jamie Lee Curtis, and it's been a horror show ever since.
Oh.
See, and I love
that.
that you went back, because the only movie that I had to leave with my children, one of my children, my eldest, was scared of Moana. Okay, guys, this is a Disney film, and I had to take the 2 girls out. My littlest was either not born yet or was like a tiny baby, and she got scared. We didn't even get it to the giant crab scene, so I don't even remember what she was scared of.
Well, I am petrified of crabs, so I could
It was the
understand
coconut.
that
I think it was the coconut people. She was scared of the coconut people. I don't know, guys. Consider the coconuts.
If you're scared of crabs, I hope you're not watching House of the Dragons.
No, I'm
Serious
not.
crab
Yeah.
stuff going on there. Oh.
Yeah, I
Serious
don't.
crabs.
Yeah, I don't like the way they sideways walk. I feel
Crabs?
like they're up to
Okay,
something.
everybody should be scared of not so much crabs, but lobstrosities, thanks to the drawing of the 3. If you're not scared of that, you didn't read enough Stephen King. If
This
you
is
aren't
true.
scared, that's your problem.
This is true.
Lobsters are creepy.
Lobstrosities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be our next anthology, lobster horror.
Seriously,
Yeah.
crustaceans
Yes.
are
Crustaceans.
first off, people are allergic, so there you go. But beyond that,
Yeah.
kind of bothersome. It's fine.
It'd be
Also,
our
I
luck
learned
to get 300 stories about shellfish allergies.
I was going to say, and the fact that EpiPens are so expensive.
Yes.
That's the true horror.
Yes,
It's actually
yes.
about our
the big
healthcare
bad is
system.
big pharma. There you go.
Yeah.
Saw that coming. That's fine. But Vince, you were able to actually go back and finish watching Jaws. I'm actually surprised your dad was willing to pay money to take you again. Like, are you
Again
sure
and
you
again.
Well, keep in mind, this was like 76, so HBO hadn't even started or
True.
anything.
True.
So it's
There
like the only way
wasn't
my
another
poor
option.
dad was going to get to see this movie was to keep going.
So was it you wanted to go back, or your dad's like, come on, Vince, come on, just
But
Yeah.
then the funny thing was, then he had Peter Benchley's novel in the house. So after I saw the movie, then I wanted to read the book. I didn't understand half of it, but that then developed my love for the dark stuff. Reading that, and I think I read Jack Ketchum's Off Season when I was 12. And you want to talk about something that really affects you? I mean, wow.
Yeah.
That work for 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
I know it's not. I feel like almost every author that we've talked to who writes dark fiction, whether that be sci-fi, fantasy, horror, even thrillers, everybody has that story of this is the book I read when I was too young to be reading a book
Yes.
like that. Mine was Pet Sematary when I was 10. Thought it was
Okay.
going to be about a cat.
Well,
Not about a
Why
cat,
was
really.
World According to Garp when my mom wouldn't let me read Anne Rice anymore?
World According to Garp is in its own way very horrifying.
Yeah, it's not so much. Well, some
Very
horrible
adult.
things happened, but very adult. And she just was like, Anne Rice wears dirty underwear, and she didn't want me reading any more Anne Rice, and she didn't get that me knew what a vampire was. Fantasy was not going to be nearly as traumatized as everything that happens in the John Irving books. I've read most of them; they're my favorite, but that's fine. I don't consider them dark.
No, I think they're emotionally dark. I read The Hotel New Hampshire when I was pretty young because my parents said I could because I had the word New Hampshire in the title.
That's fine. I don't get their logic, Jen.
I thought it was a travelogue.
I know. They're like, that's fine. You can read
Yeah,
that.
read it for class when you learn about your state's history. Is that how that works? I don't think so.
Now I have this sudden urge. I want to go watch John Irving movie adaptations.
Well, which is your favorite? You're gonna go watch some Cider House Rules, or are you gonna go watch? Well, World According to Garp is a good one.
I kind of like Hotel New Hampshire. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Fair, very fair.
So, what are
He's
you
not
both working on now? Do you have another anthology in the works? Are you just focusing on your own writing?
Go ahead, Rena.
I am in the middle of. I started a screenplay that I need to finish. I also have a novel that is done, but I'm reworking this part in there, and I have to go to a really dark place, and I'm just not ready to do that right now.
I get that.
To get
Okay,
that
Rena,
out.
what do you do to get to that dark place?
I start thinking about things that are dark, I mean, just things in the past or things in my own life that have happened, and it just sort of takes me there, and just going back to the work, and I know what the scenes sort of have to be, and they're kind of grueling to get out, emotionally. So I just sort of have to shut in and not think about, like right now I'm like thinking about home renovations and landscaping.
Okay, those can
And
be
so-
pretty horrific too, but honestly,
Yes.
probably not what you want in your book.
Yeah, different kind of horrific. So I'm hoping that with the change of the seasons, it'll help a little bit.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Fall
the
always
second-
gets me in the mood, right?
And those long, dark nights where you're just
Yes.
like, oh, anything terrible can happen now.
Yeah, I love how you said it with such hope.
Exactly.
Anything terrible can happen.
Exactly. So that, and then I have a few short stories that I have committed to writing, and for me it's mostly writing stuff. So I'll leave it to Vince.
Well, we're
since he-
hoping, we're both hoping that we get
Oh yes,
to do a sequel to what? Other
Other Terrors too.
Other Terrors too, Electric Boogaloo.
We're really hoping, that
Yeah.
that HarperCollins will come back and want another volume. Right now, I'm doing an open call for the 3rd volume in the Unspeakable Horror series, subtitled Dark Rainbow Rising. And that one's underway now. The call is until the end of September, and I have to have that turned into the publisher early December. And of course, we've already thought of a theme for volume 4 and 5. But Rena and I actually were brainstorming, if we don't get to do another Other Terrors 2, we have another anthology idea in the mix that we're considering. So, and then in my spare time, maybe get to my own writing and finish that elusive second novel that's been like, I don't even know why I have anything on my website about it, because it's second novel. Yeah, okay.
Maybe it's a reminder that you were supposed to write one.
I'm aspiring to be the Donna Tartt of horror. You know how she writes one book like every 15 years?
Yeah, but they're all masterpieces. They just they come out and you're like, oh, it's freaking perfect.
Exactly. So.
It was worth the 12-year wait in between each book.
I'll allow it. Most times, we slag on authors who take too long to do it, but I think we forget that a lot of them, like you, are doing 80 other things. So it may not be the top of their agenda because they've got anthologies that they're editing and they have day jobs and all these.
Honestly, the anthologies are just so enjoyable. I love, I love working with other writers. I love co-editing with other editors, and I love, a lot of editors will say they hate the slush pile. I love the slush pile. I just love to find that 1 in 100, writer where you can give them their first chance, discover a new voice.
Okay, so were there some in Other Terrors that this is the first place that they've been published? Did you discover any gems that this was their first foray into the sunshine?
I'm not sure if it's first. Definitely the highest, prestige project for them. Definitely. First writer, though, I don't know. I think I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're so picky.
None of them made it.
They had to at least been writing for 10 or more years for us to. I mean, because the competition was really tough, because the stuff that the slush pile. He said slush pile, but the slush pile that we got, I mean, there were hardly any typos. Their stories were very clean. And I mean, some of their stories were
cleaner than the invited guests.
Well, look, when you say that somebody sent you a story right after you talked to them, and then 10 minutes later, 3,000 words show up, you're allowed a typo because you just can't type that fast otherwise.
Yeah. He was probably using voice to type in a phone, but it's Stephen Graham Jones.
While he was on his bicycle, wrestling with the rattlesnake on his bicycle. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, that totally sounds like him.
Yeah, I was going to say a slush pile when the caliber is that high is really more like a buffet where you get to pick the choice morsels. Not really a slush pile, because slush pile sounds like, oh, what's in here? And it's just the drudge of having to find something good rather than finding the very best of the best.
Yeah.
You guys are lucky to do that. Those are
lucky.
Awesome to do that. And I'm glad that they were clean, because you don't want to hear about typos, but everybody makes them. It doesn't make you a bad writer. It means
no, not at all.
But even just the formatting and just the HWA members were they impressed us.
Nobody sent it on a cocktail napkin? Okay.
No cocktail napkins. No.
Value.
Nobody sent to PDF.
Nobody said nothing was like typed up in papyrus.
No, there were no weird rogue fonts. No rogue fonts.
The Joker.
No.
Oh, well, you guys have been amazing to talk to. Thank you for being our first editors.
Yay.
Thank you.
I have to just give a little shout out, because this is just, I've been so bummed for the last 24 hours, but mad props to Peter Stroud.
Yeah,
I was going to bring him up.
Gutted that he passed. Such a nice man, a phenomenal writer, so good to everybody that he met, and I just want to say, hey, Peter,
Peter,
legend.
Honestly, I can probably say that none of us that are on this show right now would be here if it wasn't for Peter Straub.
Exactly. Cheers to Peter.
Cheers to Peter.
And for people who watch the show and know just our own backgrounds, Jen's the horror one, and I usually run Screaming from Horror, and my exception has always been Peter Straub, and that's
This
like,
is how
why
I
don't we
trick
horror?
Allison
Except-
into reading other
I know.
horrors now,
She's
because
like,
I'm like,
oh, by the way, but
it's
it's like
just like
Peter
Peter
Straub. I'm like,
Straub.
oh, okay. And I don't know why that is. And I it was probably, again, a gateway drug, because my sister got me to read a little bit of Stephen King, telling me it was fantasy, because some of it was. And then once you read The Talisman, you really can't go back. And next thing you've got Coco. And
I know, and then you're reading Coco,
Yeah.
and then
And then you're
What
going,
was what was your favorite Peter Straub work?
it's Coco.
Okay.
And Coco's probably one of the darkest too. And you're going, there's never a gorilla in here. I really thought All Ball and the gorilla were involved when I picked that up. Nope. This is what happens when you don't read the flap. It's not Coco the gorilla, guys. Really, it
I
isn't.
think
But all of it, and Lost Boy, Lost Girl.
Lost Boy, Lost Girl is probably, like, I always say Ghost Story is my favorite, because I'm just like such a sucker for that book.
Mhm.
I've read it so many times. But Lost Boy, Lost Girl and The Night Room
Mhm.
have like such a special place in my heart. Like, I actually made paintings based on those
Wow.
books, like
Nice.
when I first read them.
And I always say I have a hard time with short stories a lot of times, because a lot of times it's like, well, you don't really get sucked in. But Peter's Houses Without Doors, one of my absolute favorites. And the people who can pull off a short story, my hat's off to it. And he's one of them who can. And now we have to say he's one who could, because we aren't going to get any more.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you mentioned him. He was going to be part of my farewell.
I didn't mean to steal your
So you stole
thunder.
my thunder.
I'm sorry.
Thunder, Vince. Damn you.
You're not going to get on the show again, Vince.
I know. It'll be
I'm
Pure
gonna-
Terrors
I'm
2,
gonna-
edited by
Terrors
Rena Mason and
2.
some other whose
I'm
name
going to
never
have
even that
Rena
famous.
on and Jamie Lee Curtis and
Oh.
not you. That's what you get, Vince.
No, we
It'll
want
just-
Vince back
It'll
and
just
Jamie
be me
Lee
and
Curtis,
drag.
too.
Don't worry.
It's fine.
No, you're both welcome back anytime for your own
Thank you.
projects, other things that you are editors for.
If
Just
Vince
to
ever
come.
finishes a second novel,
Oh,
Rena,
Vince
is your screenplay for a movie, a TV show, a play?
It's for a movie. It's for a
Okay, so when
movie.
your movie's out, we want you on for that too, and then we can do a popcorn screening.
Is there a
screening
part for
classes.
Jamie Lee Curtis?
Maybe. This is when I remind you all that Jen went to theater school and would happily. She would.
Well,
She would
we're gonna
I
have to
work
talk
cheap.
You work cheap.
I work cheap. So thank you again, Vince and Rena. You have
thank you,
been
guys.
amazing.
Yes,
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having us.
Allison,
For having
as
us.
always.
Everybody,
People-
come get the book.
Go
We
get
want a
other
sequel.
terrors.
Yes, there's something for everyone in here.
Oh yes.
Yes.
They're all so
There
different. the
definitely
stories.
Regardless of how you feel about iguanas.
If you are watching this live or on the replay, make sure you tune in next week when we have Kim Taylor Blakemore back to talk about her new historical mystery novel, Deception. So that will be next week, and we will see you all then.